This is the One and All podcast, a proud member of the Dunham Audio Network.
We will always be the same. Our beliefs will be unchanging and unwavering. We believe continually in one truth, but for all humanity. In one Savior, but for all people. One truth that will be delivered in love and compassion, connecting every one person to all that God has promised them.
Welcome to the One and All podcast. This is your host, Aaron Magnuson, joined by
Ben Lounsbury.
And today we get a chance to sit down with Rory Eldridge and Steve Meharg and just have a great conversation about how they ended up at One and All.
And hearing from their upbringing, you get to know a lot about who they are, their quirks, why they do certain things, what goes into a lot of who they are as people today. And so we hope and pray that these little nuggets of wisdom are beneficial to you and enlighten you on who they are as your pastors.
Enjoy this conversation.
Okay, first thing, what we like to do if it's your first time
Thank you for remembering.
on this podcast, which for Steve and Rory it is, we like to have you try and describe the room that you're in, because I think it's really helpful for listeners to understand where the voices are coming from. So Steve, have a go and try and paint a picture for people.
This is a room that has had a minor touch from Aaron's wife and a major touch from Aaron. And I think that means that there are hints of style trying to break in, but in reality, a dude lives here. There's a whiteboard that has a semblance of to-do lists on it, but I would argue they've probably been there for 6 months. And
This is so good.
and
This is brutal.
Otherwise, it's a generic office that has been transformed into a sound recording studio, bit of sound deadening on the walls, and all the equipment makes it look pretty pro in here, pretty professional, pretty cool.
Where do you sit in this room?
I am sitting in the corner, which reminds me of the worst movie in the world that my wife makes me watch every now and again. Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner.
What?
Have you ever seen that movie, Dirty
No.
Dancing? It's the worst movie of all time with the
I
worst
thought the
script.
title was Don't Put the Baby in the Corner.
Anyway, and that's the pinnacle moment of the
Okay.
film for me, where the idiot father says an idiot line in an idiot way. Nobody puts baby in the corner.
Oh,
So it's so bad that it's so good, because every time Christy says that movie's good, I just quote that line. Nobody puts baby in the corner.
well. All right. Thank you, Steve.
So good.
What about you, Rory?
I'm sitting next to the door, and I recently watched the latest Rambo movie, Last Blood, and it's reminding me of his underground compound with his little lights and it's like all that stuff. So I'm just getting Rambo vibes.
I'll take that.
There is a little bit of compound about this room.
Dude's room, Rambo vibes, meet Aaron Magnuson.
Hey,
Yep.
that's it.
Well, thank you for giving some detail about where we're sitting. But today, we want to peel back the curtain and find out a little more about Rory and Steve, where you guys grew up, obviously, Australia for Steve. But I was chatting to Aaron a little bit before this going, how much do you really know about Steve, unless you have a personal relationship with him? For people that attend the church or whether it be online or in person, I think it's so awesome to find out who these people are, what their pet hates are, what their favorite things are, where they came from, what their upbringing was like, and how that's kind of affected where you're at today in your roles in church at One and All. So, Steve.
I grew up in the leafy northern suburbs of Brisbane, which we like to call Bris Vegas.
Bris Vegas.
And it is, think East Coast American climate, as in high humidity, more of a tropical sort of climate. I had a a great upbringing. I had a great family, and just your, lower middle class area. Where I grew up was a rough area when I first grew up. So I got into a lot of junk early when I was really little, like crazy little. So my life is sort of weird in the sense that when I look back on my life, it's like I got all my high school rebellion done when I was 12.
Nice.
So
just got that out the way early.
Very different. Like we were stealing everything we could steal when we were like 10 years old. Like we started really early. We had older brothers. And so I think we just got into it. I remember drinking rum at primary school during the lunch break when I was in grade 6, which is when I'm 11. And I'm thinking, how did that happen? Like,
did you actually enjoy the taste?
No, of course not. But we just and again, it was never from a rebellious spirit. It was more from we just wanted to have fun. We didn't skip school to be rebels. We skipped school to go and ride motorbikes and jump off houses into pools. Like that seemed fun. So yeah, that was my upbringing. It was a little bit different. But the cool thing was that I got a lot of that out of my system.
Yeah.
And I thank God in a way that His grace is so evident in my life that He saved me from myself in a few different areas. I had access to drugs because I used to, it was close proximity in my life. But I remember the day I asked to participate, I was only 13, and the person I asked said, no, I think you're too young. And the minute he said that, I had this relief and I thought, I actually didn't want to do that anyway.
Oh, wow.
And I praise God for that because my personality is if I do something, I do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And if someone halfway through me doing something says, I dare you to do this, the old stupid Steve would have been like, you bet. Like anything you dare, I will do it. So I praise God. I felt like He protected me. So my upbringing is a little bit different. And I also think God's grace that He allowed me to see a world that I didn't necessarily have to be broken by or scarred by. And then, but I didn't grow up in a sheltered experience of life either, which was really cool. So now as a pastor, I thank God that I've seen a lot. Because I unfortunately I got to continue to see a lot, even though I stopped participating. I was still in that world, and so that's my upbringing. Brisbane, fantastic place to live. You can't get a plane ticket there right now. Sorry, so you'll have to put Australia on down the list.
Would you say Brisbane is? What would you? I know you say Bris Vegas, but what would you liken it to? Resemble most closely here in the States? I have my opinions as well.
You have your opinions.
I'm familiar with Brisbane.
So I would say something like as San Diego is to LA, Brisbane is to Sydney. So San Diego is like idyllic, really nice, slightly lower pace. But if you know where to look, you can find great stuff in San Diego. Whereas LA would be more like Sydney, which is it's got the best of everything, but it also has the worst of everything. And so Brisbane's like a tame version of Sydney. Yeah. And Brisbane when I grew up was dead. Like Brisbane when I grew up was literally the joke in Australia was it's Australia's largest country town, and
that's a joke.
That was a joke. But then as we grew up, it actually got more and more sophisticated because a lot of people moved north.
Yeah.
Heaps of people got sick of the weather. And I mean, Melbourne is the coolest city in Australia by far, but it's
crazy weather.
It has got the worst weather. Melbourne is like a really great European city. So all of the best culture from Europe landed in Melbourne. Best food, best coffee, great art, great culture. Melbourne's the best for that. Sydney is a little bit more like a New York vibe, as in fast-moving, success-driven, image-conscious, but as a result of those things, you can get whatever you want. And Sydney Harbour is probably one of the more beautiful cities in the world. Like I would say.
Oh yeah.
I've travelled around the world a fair bit, and I would say it's not too arrogant to say that Sydney is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And then Brisbane is not that pretty. It's just on a river.
Yeah.
But the weather is the best. And the culture is good. The people are chilled. And the coast, the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast that are close to Brisbane are priceless.
So
absolutely.
Would you agree with that though, real quick? San Diego to LA. Would you agree with the comparison?
So I was going to say, and this is probably more so Gold Coast Surfers Paradise than Brisbane, like the city center. But they're not too far from each other. It reminds me of, it's got Florida vibes to me, and part of it is the humidity, but the sunshine, like the Surfers Paradise in particular, kind of feels that way.
But Cavill Avenue, which is the little mall in the center of Surfers Paradise, is a total ripoff of Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh yeah, oh totally.
That's funny.
But yeah, I get like so you're getting like the beachy, the kind of the sandy energy, like the San Diego. On the West Coast, that would be the closest thing you could probably liken it to.
San Diego. But you would compare it to Florida. If we weren't stuck to the West Coast, you would say like a Florida feel.
But the definition of the word beach, if you're thinking of the beaches of California, we need to come up with a new word for the word beach. Because if you say the beach at the Sunshine Coast, for instance, then you might have this illusion that those two things are comparable.
Yeah.
But they're not.
So explain the biggest difference. For Rory and I. Have you been? No. Okay, right. See, so Rory and I, the room is split right now. And the reason Ben and Steve are having a great conversation is because they both experienced these magical places, right? Rory and I soon to come, right?
Yep.
But, so Steve, what is the big, is it the sand? I'm assuming not, right? Or what is the biggest difference?
So a beach in the Sunshine Coast of Queensland has white sand, right? It has fine granulated sand. In fact, it's so fine that, and only Ben would know what this means, but when you walk, it squeaks. It goes, it's really weird because the sand is so fine that as you walk on it, it squeaks.
Really?
And the big difference is that it's like looking at the world through a VGA TV versus a high definition 4000K TV. That there's no smog. The trees are beautiful. The trees are green. The sand is white, and the ocean's clean. And the other big factor is that the water is warm.
Yeah.
Oh,
so warm.
It's so much, like it's so warm. If you swam in the winter, us Queenslanders don't swim in the winter because we think it's cold. It's the same it'd be warmer in the winter there than it is here in the summer. So
this is particularly funny because Rory, as you guys will find out soon, is from the Northwest, and I am also from the Northwest. And our beaches are even like California to us in the Northwest is what you guys are describing.
Our beaches were rocks, man. It's just rocks.
But it looks beautiful up there.
Yeah, it's a different kind of beauty, but
you're
it's not the sandy beaches of Southern California.
I'm not going to call that a beach. That's right. Exactly. And you're not going to go swimming in that water.
Heck no.
No.
Australia cheats as well. Like we bring in sand.
I know.
I
found that out last year.
On our popular tourist beaches, like
Bondi.
That's a moneymaker right there. So they pump white sand from the other beaches and put it on.
Have you been to Himes Beach?
Himes.
It's south of Sydney, about 3 hours.
No.
It's a proclaimed like whitest sand beach, but then there's one other that I think that might
There's one in
be the
Tasmania
whitest.
that regularly wins the best beach in the world. And then there's the actual scientifically best sand in the world is at Lake Mackenzie in Fraser Island. Have you ever been to Fraser Island?
No.
So just do yourself a favor and type that into your Google. Lake Mackenzie at Fraser Island is the scientifically proven most perfect sand in the world.
Wow.
And most
scientifically proven. Wow.
Well, as in they say that every grain is the same size. And it's on this a World Heritage listed, the world's largest sand island in the world is called Fraser Island. It's the most beautiful place. The whole island is a national park. It's up the north of Brisbane, a couple of hours, 4 or 5 hours drive north. But if you type in Lake Mackenzie, you will see what I'm talking about. It is spectacular. And I have swum in that's a freshwater lake in the middle of a sand island. And it is...
Wow. I'm looking at the picture. Steve has pulled it up. I think Ben is searching for it. It is picture perfect.
That's a desktop screen.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say.
Photo, right?
That's a screen
what
saver.
It looks like. It's like you just sit there thinking the water is like out of a tap, clear. You can't... and it's actually because the lake is acidic. So nothing grows in it. So there's no weed. There's nothing. So it's literally just clear water on this white sand in the middle of this giant island. It's really beautiful.
So Steve, what on earth brought you to this godforsaken land called Southern California?
A question I ask God every night.
Well, when did you get in? You got involved in ministry in Australia.
Skipping ahead a little bit here.
Yeah.
How'd that start up?
Well, I became a Christian when I was probably 16 or 17. 16, and then really kicked into gear when I was 17. And the way I would describe it is like, anyone who knows me knows I love life, happy-go-lucky, love adventure, love sport, I love literature. I love all aspects of life. But I would say this weird thing happened when I became a Christian. It was like everything lost its flavor except for God. In a fairly dramatic way, I can only say that God did that because he was guiding me down a path. And I realized I desperately wanted to be a pastor, but in Australia, that is a very different picture to America. Being a pastor is not a job that anyone would think of in Australia. And you think too, me growing up is pre-Hillsong, it's any church of any sort of concept of church being either popular or substantial or even having a cultural voice. And so to be thinking of yourself as a pastor in Australia is in no way a glamorous role. It is like you've decided to be poor, to be maligned, and to suffer. And so I also thought the other thing when you look at all the pastors when I grew up was they're all old. And so I came up through a conservative background, Baptist church in Australia. Baptist church in Australia is not like Southern Baptist here. It's more like your evangelical mainline, theologically. And so anyway, I'm thinking, right, I want to be a pastor, but I'm going to have to wait till I'm 40 because God has to straighten me out. God has to transform me. God has to change me. So I quickly looked for a job that would allow me to continue to volunteer at the church. Because at the time I was in a small church plant and I was running the youth program that the church had not ever had a youth pastor. It was that small in its history. And I loved that little church. It was the church I grew up in. And so I just did a education degree. My studies are a long story, but I did business first, then I did literature and history majors, and then I did education postgrad. And then right when I was about to get a job as a 23-year-old, my studies were delayed a little because I had a major car accident, smacked my head in a big way. Just as I'm about to shift into being a teacher, my senior pastor took me for a coffee and said, "Don't become a teacher. We want you to be our youth pastor." And from when I wanted to be a pastor to when I was asked that question in a McDonald's cafe,
Macca's
as we call it,
nice.
That was 7 years. So when you're young, 7 years feels like an eternity.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Now we look back and we think 16 to 23, it's not even a thing. But back then that felt like I had waited for an eternity.
Yeah, wow.
And I gave the spiritual answer. I said, I'll pray about it. But inside I was like, whoop, woo.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this. I've been longing for this. And then I switched gears. I literally went straight to Bible college. And I love lectures, but I hate study. I love learning, but I hate writing assignments.
Same.
And I just went straight into Bible college. And by the time I finished Bible college, I'd done 14 years of study outside of school. So I was like, God.
So you're a doctor.
I am done.
Yes.
I am Dr. Done. Steve.
Yeah. I'm not a doctor.
Dr.
Meharg. I keep doing bachelor's.
That's right.
I'm the dumbest tertiary educator.
You're a bachelor 3 times over.
So that's my background. And then I got into ministry and just went straight in. I was youth pastor for 5 or 6 years. Went into associate because it was a small church. Me and the lead pastor, Stan, who I'm still best mates with, we just led the church together. He was an incredibly empowering leader. I never felt like the young understudy. I always felt like we were a team.
Yeah.
He did a fantastic job of that. Then I took over the church at 29, which to me, I was really angry at God for that because I felt like I'm too young. I don't know what I'm doing. And now I have to take over a church too young. And coincidentally, that is right about when I met Jeff Vines, who a very close friend of mine introduced me to Jeff. And he just became like a mentor, a long-distance mentor, someone I really looked up to, loved his preaching.
How did you come across him, and how many years ago was this?
So I met...
At least 40? No.
So I met... I was trying to think about this. I think it was in 2009 that I met Jeff. And we had a game of golf together, which is
just about the time I went to Australia.
Should be it was right as so our friend Clive, he was telling me about Ben, but he'd introduced me to Jeff as well. And then it's a long but very funny story that my senior pastor, Stan, never liked Jeff at all because the very first thing that he said to Stan was, we could get Steve to come over to America for a while and do some stuff, and we could send one of our young leaders over. And we walked out of the meeting and my senior pastor goes, what the heck? He's going to help me by stealing my guy?
That's funny.
But yeah, so I met Jeff and we'd just catch up once a year.
Yeah.
He used to come down and there wasn't, we weren't in each other's back pockets in any way, shape or form. And he randomly turned up to watch me preach one time, and I was really annoyed because it was like the worst passage I've ever preached on. It was a downer sermon. And then, when your mentor, the guy that you look up to, turns up unexpected and just sits in the crowd and you didn't even know he was in the country, and he just turns up and you're like, oh man, if I had known you were coming, I would have done one of my better ones.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was funny. And then he even preached one time for us, literally. And this is one thing I love about Jeff, by the way, is there's no church too small for Jeff. And like he landed, drove straight from the airport, and we wwere stalling. So because customs took too long. So he literally got straight off the 14-hour flight, drove from Brisbane Airport out to our church, walked out of the car, opened the Bible, and preached to our church. And
that's awesome. Yeah.
He was literally like a little bit delirious. Like he was not with it, but it was still, Jeff, it was still an awesome sermon. And then when he walked off stage, he just literally says to Clive and me, "Get me out of here." Yeah. But so I knew Jeff, and obviously Jeff was super generous. Like one time in 2010, he said, "If you ever want to come over and just check out churches in the States to learn, we'll facilitate that." I did that in 2010. I came visited and I checked out a whole bunch of churches in LA, which for an Aussie, a young pastor, that was so cool just to be exposed. The church in America thinks so big and as a result has led the way in so many areas of church development, church organizational behavior and structures and being able to really grow things. America is very good at that. And so that was really cool to learn all that stuff. And then, fast forward 5-6 years after that, Jeff sat me and Christy down and said, all right, I really want you to come and work for me, and I want you to come and do that. So,
and did he send over a young understudy to go replace you over?
No. I think that was all just
dumped it off. It's
Jeff just thinking about stuff out of the top of his head. Jeff.
Sure.
He's always got ideas. And so fast forward, then And that was really hard for us because at that point I'd been the lead pastor of that church for 5 or 6 years. The joke in Queensland was that Stephen would never, ever leave South Pine Community Church. That was the only church I'd ever been to. And I grew up in it. I became its youth pastor, its associate pastor, its senior pastor. So for us to leave was gut-wrenching. But we knew that God was doing it. And it was actually, it sounds funny, but and I don't think people would ever believe us, but the fact is that it was a much harder decision to come here than it was to stay there. And we felt like we were sacrificing to come to LA, which it doesn't sound true but we had such a neat package of a life in Brisbane. We had all our family. Brisbane is a beautiful place to live. Everything we ever wanted was right there. I used to be a cyclist and I used to race, and I had 2 racetracks within 30 minutes ride of where I lived. Everything was neat and perfect, and God was like, okay, now you're gonna get to know me better. Yeah, because I'm gonna mess with your world.
That's a great way to say it. That's a great way to say it.
So but we haven't looked back. God has been so good and gracious to us, and we're having a ball. Even though we've lost a lot of things to come here, but we know that God is replacing them spiritually, not physically, but spiritually.
That's great.
Do you remember the we had a Skype call or something? Was that I forget where that was before you actually come over. Yeah. I forget why I was talking to you. I think Clive may have just.
I think Clive was with you, and he said, "Oh, here's Ben. I want you to talk to Ben."
Okay. Well, he had been talking about you for a while about like how you were coming out or like in going to. I didn't know if that scale had tipped yet.
Because that process took a while, right?
Oh, it took ages. So when Jeff asked me to come was July 2014. I said yes in November 2014. And then the visa, which was supposed to take 2 months, did not process until March 2016.
Yeah.
So we had a year and a half.
I was still in Australia in 2014.
Yeah, we had a year and a half of limbo where I was digging ditches as a landscaper. So that was pretty fun.
So you weren't at the church during this time?
Well, no, because obviously you want to leave well. If you're a good leader, you leave well, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were still there, like how mentally that would...
The minute, I told my elders in July that we were considering this, because there is another long story of the day that Jeff asked us. We had a bit of a bizarre spiritual experience the night before where right from day one, we knew God was doing something. He was either moving us out of our church to another church in Australia or he was moving us to America. Because it was messing with our heads the way it all started. That's a long story, but maybe for another time. But so I straight away told my elders, because if I'm going to consider something as serious as that, then I'm not going to do that in an unethical way. So I shared it with my elders. We prayed about it and we said yes in November. And then it was supposed to be a 2 to 4 month process. So straight away, I informed the church probably around December 2014. We had a exit date for, I think, February 2015, so that we'd take them through the new year. And then I had an interim guy set up, a 6-month interim, because we'd had such a good season at South Pine. We knew that there should be an interim, because if you put a new leader in straight off the back of the old one, then there's going to be too much comparison. And the church was like upset that we were leaving. So we wanted to make it healthy. So we had a 6-month interim. And then right near the end of me finishing up, we found the guy that we would be the new lead pastor, which was really cool. But then I was finished. So I exited really nicely off a beautiful plan, imagining that we'd be getting our visa any day.
Sure.
And then it's really weird living your life. I checked the website every day for over a year.
Wow.
Because the church here was saying, when are you coming? And I'm like, well, when your government says I can,
Yeah.
And then I couldn't take an interim job either or anything, because as far as I knew, I could be leaving tomorrow.
Day.
Right.
So it's really weird that I had churches approach me, oh, you're available, cool. Can you do a 6 month or a 1 year? And it's like, nope, because I can only promise you a week.
Yeah.
And so in the end, I just went and got grunt work. My wife liked it because I got muscly and didn't look like a pastor. I looked like a man for at least 2 years of my life.
Because those are entirely separate, those two things.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Not the soft-handed.
Opposite poles.
Soft-hand pastor. And I used to do like 15-hour days because we needed to eat.
Yeah.
And it was lugging rock, digging holes. And I cracked it once on my birthday. I was the only day I got annoyed because Christy asked me, how was your day? And I said, I dug 14 holes. That's what I did on my birthday in 2015.
Wow.
With a crowbar. What do you call a crowbar here? A big long...
Crowbar.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, 14 holes on the side of the hill.
It's not a crowbar.
Yeah, it's more of a
The
shovel.
big long, like a 9-foot steel pole that you jam down into the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Crowbars are normally curved here.
So,
like
kind of
same
a big
thing.
6-foot thing.
Yeah, you can tell Rory and I have very soft hands.
We are,
Yes.
No calluses.
I would call it a big, tall steel pole.
Yeah.
Here.
So we call that a crowbar. But that was a great time for me too because I got to hang with a crew of rough dudes.
Yeah.
And I loved that because I shared my faith in a whole different way. Had a lot of time by myself. I remember I went to one place and we had to use a weed eater. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Sure.
We call that a whippersnipper. There you go.
Whippersnipper.
A
That's a brand though, isn't it?
Maybe.
Whippersnipper?
If it's not, it should be.
So
Free ideas, yeah.
I went to this place. It was all cliffside, and they said we need to clear the fire roads with thing. And I thought, okay, how long do you reckon that's going to take? You know, if you're going to do 12 to 14-hour days. So I'm thinking 10 days. And he goes, yeah, we should be finished here in 6 weeks. and he sent me to do that job by myself. So
that's long days.
I was by myself, weed whacking. Whatever
What would you
call it.
listen to? You had to have an iPod or something.
Yeah, I used to do podcasts and music and things like that. But it was like just covered in grass because this was like 6-foot grass.
Yeah,
it wasn't like a nice lawn. This is like fire trails and.
Do you want to tell us really quick for our listening audience, what is your role at ONE&ALL?
Okay, so I wear a couple of hats like Rory. He and I sort of share what would I say is the link between our teams and the executive. So I'm over multi-site technically. Rory's over ministry technically. But I would say that even this morning we had a tag team conversation of which one of us talks to this particular staff member about this because we both really tag team a lot. Rory's campus pastor at Rancho. I'm the campus pastor at San Dimas. Rory's on the teaching team. I'm on the teaching team. We're just the same dude, and there's two of us.
Yep,
that's good.
And I joke with Rory, but very seriously often, and I say, hey, we've always got to be good because if us two are not good.
Yeah.
When I say good, I mean that we are relating to each other openly and honestly and robustly. I said if we're not good, Satan has got a foothold in this church.
Yep.
Because really our job, I think, is to translate what God is leading the head of our church, which is Jeff and Dale. You know, when God's leading them, we really are. We're like the drive shaft. We've got to get all that power down to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've got to get it down into our teams, into our people, and even into our congregation because both him and I have a speaking role too in the sense of always hosting and that sort of thing. So really trying to get the vision of our church down into our church in such a way that it makes that we get momentum when we go the distance. So that's our role. We're very similar, but I do the multi-site technically.
Well, I love that you described it as relationship primarily between you two because, it's good to have clarity in terms of, hey, have this on your mind, be taking care of these things. However, in its function, if it's not, at least what I found, and you could maybe present something that differs from this, but you have to be able to have flexible function. And it's making the ask to Rory, like, hey, you know, or who should speak on behalf of this,
right?
You know, being able to do that instead of going, nah, I can't because I don't wear that hat, you know, or that's not on my list, can be really like crippling. You presenting it like that is
yes.
Well, one of the blessings of growing up where I did was, you know, in the Baptist Union that I was a leader in who grew up through the ranks, got to see it all. There's 200 plus churches, 218 churches in the Queensland Baptist Union. And as a result, I got to see the good, the bad, the ugly. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you right now that no org chart is ever going to safeguard a church.
Yeah.
Everything comes down to being Christ-like in our relationships.
People, yeah.
And you can have the best structures, the best pastors, the best leaders, but if you're not daily relating to one another as Christ calls you to and holding that high standard,
that's good.
Then your church is a time bomb.
Yeah.
And
it's very good.
And you know, the other thing I always say, and you know, Aaron, I get to work with Aaron closely.
Steve is my direct report, just for the listeners.
That's right.
That's how that works.
But one thing I say to Aaron too is that the other thing, which is the unseen thing, is that Satan takes out marriages.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because that's the other thing is a lot of wives and husbands, they're like silent partners on that org chart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If God takes out a marriage, now there's a cancer in this church.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when I say takes out a marriage, I don't mean they get divorced. I mean they're not enjoying Christ-like community in their marriage. And then I would say that the best picture of a staff team is a marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
So Rory, will you marry me?
We're married. Yes, I do.
Well, before that happens, we got to meet this other half here, Rory Eldridge from up north. Rory, would you just give us a little, just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Now help me just 1 second. If the Minnesotans say and oot and a boot, what do the Seattle folks say?
I hear that we said pop versus soda down here. That's our difference.
Okay.
I don't know if accent wise, if there's a
I know that's a
massive
Cleveland thing as well. They call it pop.
Yep.
Australia basically is a whole nation of alcoholics. So we call soda
fizzy drinks.
Soft drink.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Because if you
Here you go.
That's really fascinating.
you're soft.
Yeah.
I am. Is that why it's called soft drink?
No, because they would say that a hard drink
Is alcoholic.
contains alcohol.
I have never
and
associated.
so soft drink is soda or
That makes
pop.
perfect sense. I've just never associated soft drink why they call it soft that.
That's all. So we would call it soft drink.
That makes sense.
I don't know where it originated.
But that is what it's in reference to.
In Australia, all fizzy drinks are called soft drink.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There you go.
I like that.
Too much of it makes you soft.
There you go.
That's true too.
No, that's not true. It makes you fat, but
Soft. Different kind of soft. Anyways. Rory, continue.
So hail from the great Northwest, as Aaron alluded to. Kirkland, Washington, to be exact, just on the east side of Seattle, home to Costco and Microsoft and all the things. Kirkland signature.
The Kirkland. The best
Kirkland.
The best cookies, all the stuff.
To be completely fair to Kirkland, I have not, anytime Megan and I go to Costco, we frequent Costco. Ben and I were actually having this conversation the other day. We frequent Costco way too much. So during this quarantine time, it's very difficult. I have not had a bad product experience with anything Kirkland has made.
Oh no, Kirkland signature. I'm
It's
telling
all
you, man.
good. It's all good.
All good. And the CEO of Costco went to our church growing up too. So fun facts.
They produce even down to the people. Great products.
Great products. So born and raised.
And we are
Kirkland,
looking for
Washington.
sponsors as well.
Costco, if you hear us out. So born and raised there and lived there for 33 years, essentially, of my life. church going wise, we were kind of Christmas and Easter creaster people.
Yeah.
And then Christmas Eve in 1995, went to a Christmas Eve service. My mom always took us to the midnight service, and we always kind of went kicking and screaming, but it was her thing. And so she took us to church that night. And I had heard the gospel message before, but like genuinely, like never heard it before. And I remember sitting next to my sister, who's 6 years older than me, super cool, looked up to her, all that stuff, and her boyfriend at the time. And it was one of those moments, like, traditional altar call, like stand up out of your seat, come forward kind of thing. And I never felt that way in my life, but there was just like, I had to respond to that message. So little 12-year-old Rory pops up out of his seat, walks down the aisle, and then slowly but surely start to get connected. My mom continued to take me to church. They do this like Wednesday night Bible study thing, and then there would be youth ministry. But I remember, as a 12-year-old, you're going to church, and it was a sizable church. So you'd go in and you don't know anybody, and I would just freak out. I'd walk into the youth room, and then I'd be peace out and hang out in the hallway for like 3 weeks in a row. So I was a portly little dude with big bottle glasses and everything, and this was just too much for me. And then on that third week, I remember my buddy AJ, who I did know from school, but didn't know that he went to the church. He popped out into the hallway and said, "Hey, do you want to come join me?" And that little interaction was a game changer, because somebody invited me in, like kind of like, "Hey, you can sit here," kind of a thing. And then from that day forward, got plugged into a really thriving youth ministry. Over the course of the year, started doing mission trips and camps and things like that, and starting to serve on student leadership. And so then all the way through junior high and high school, that was kind of my journey. During that time, though, sports was huge in my world. My sister's like world-class swimmer, almost made the Olympic team in 2000 as a swimmer and everything. So sports really ruled in our household.
Which sport in particular?
She was a swimmer. I did baseball. I swam kind of like to stay in shape for baseball, but baseball was the thing. Took school pretty seriously too. So like trying to nail down those grades, which is really interesting because I really struggled in elementary school, and had to go to summer school, 6th grade going into 7th grade.
Really?
And I remember going in there into like these remedial courses or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm a stupid kid. And I remember that like hitting me in a crazy way, like, oh, wow. Like here I am. And I remember going home one day, and Notre Dame was having a football game, and they did a post-game interview with the quarterback at the time. He said, "Hey, if you want to go to Notre Dame, you have to be smart." And I don't know why, like NBC at the time, they always showed the Notre Dame football games, and I'd always watch on a Saturday. And I remember this guy saying, "Hey, if you want to, go to Notre Dame, you got to be smart." And for whatever reason, I'm not even a Notre Dame fan, but that clicked. Like, I don't want to be stupid. Yeah. I can do this. I just never put forth the effort.
Yeah, wow.
And so 7th grade starts, and I remember first period, Miss McCarter's class, science, I got an A. And I was like, wait a second. I can do this.
Yeah.
I can actually do this. And then ended up getting straight A's and kind of thriving all the way through junior high and high school and all that stuff. And then ended up taking a scholarship at Washington State University, and wanted to study mass communication because the dream was to be on ESPN. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be like the next
like
Stuart
analyst?
Scott, the analyst. Yep, that's what I wanted to do. Washington State had like one of the best ranked communications programs in all of the world. And so went there to study that. And then this is where God really got a hold of me. So through junior high and high school, really plugged into the youth ministry. But my junior year, one of our youth leaders molested one of my best friends, and it messed me up in a big way. I was still kind of connected, but like that threw me for a loop. So I'd show up to service or whatever, but I was kind of jaded. And then went off to Washington State, which they call Wazoo, big party school and everything. And I was not connected to a church at all. Totally, in the wheat fields of Washington now, no metropolis. It's just in the middle of nowhere. And I was just kind of floundering. And then at the same time, too, I was taking a prescription medication, and it really wrecked my liver. Like, so I was at Washington State, doing mass communications and also playing baseball. So like 185 pounds, athlete, baseball guy, and then take this prescription drug, which over the course of a couple months wrecks me. And I'm like starting to feel like sick to the stomach, nauseous all the time, going to the bathroom constantly, just constantly, like whenever I'd eat, I just going. So then it was so painful. I was just found myself losing a ton of weight, and it would be painful to eat. And I would just constantly find myself either throwing up or sitting on the toilet and just like, what is going on? Well, this prescription drug was messing with my liver enzymes and all that stuff. And I was just like eating food and it was just coming out. And went from 185 pounds to within a year, 114. And was like rail thin, anorexic, all of that.
Wow.
And so finished my freshman year at Washington State, which I genuinely enjoyed the course of study, but I was too sick and I was not healthy in my head. I was depressed, had to quit baseball, all that stuff. So just my whole identity was absolutely upside down. So I transferred to this tiny little school back in Kirkland that a youth pastor had went to. It's the only reason I knew. And the Seahawks, the Seattle Seahawks, they had their training facility was on campus there. And so that's the only reason I even knew about this tiny little college in Kirkland, Washington called Northwest. It was Northwest College at the time, turned into Northwest University, an Assemblies of God school. I didn't grow up Pentecostal, kind of grew up evangelical, normal Baptist-y kind of thing. And then went to an AOG school and people are speaking in tongues, slanging
hands
the
down for coffee.
Whoop, and man, it was a trip. I had no idea what was going on, but it was great. I always feel like now after having both those experiences, I consider myself a charismatic with a seatbelt. So just like, I'm a little.
I've never heard that articulated that way, but that's great.
Yeah, right?
Hopefully the word of God.
Yes. So ended up there at Northwest University, and it was a great 3 years there. Ended up getting my degree in communication, dabbled in the debate team. How nerdy is that? But that's really
my brother, he went to Wheaton, and they're a huge they have a big argumentative study.
Apologetics,
But you have to learn. He did his master's there, and you have to, in classes, learn how to defend things that you're foreign to.
Yep.
So you have to dig deep and study different religions, different faiths, and you have to present that and sell the theology. And so what happens to a lot of people is they get really a lot of people get really unstable coming out of there if you don't do it well, because as you're digging into them, there's so much knowledge, and you almost learn your way out of faith. We talked a little bit about this kind of thing with Jeff last week, but the reason I bring that up is because he's a huge debater, and he just wants to talk about anything, whether or not he's actually on the side he's presenting. He just loves to present it.
He's exercising a skill that he learned.
I literally, that is my family.
Yeah.
So if you want a picture of me, a meal at our house is a combination of trash talk and debating things we do not even care about.
That's right.
Yep. As long as we're arguing with one another and trying to out argue the other person, that's the Meharg family.
And add in some soft drink and things get.
Yes. And my personality is funny. It's not even as strong as some of the people in my families.
Well, here's the funny thing too. So I did debate. I hate the actual debate thing, but they had the other part of it was an individual event. So you could go and you could write something and then you could present it. So debate, I did fine in. Wasn't floating my boat, but I'd do it because you had to do that to be on the debate team. But then they'd have these individual events where you could write a commentary or something like that and then present it. And that's where I learned, this is how you craft something.
So it's more like a speech craft.
Yes.
So,
that's what I found myself gravitating towards. We did the other side of it. But this is the side that I
If you haven't seen Rory yet, Rory is just one of the most naturally gifted communicators you'll see. He's fantastic. I'll tell you that because Rory won't say it. But,
yes. And to piggyback off of that, I'm learning things that I did not know about Rory just in regards to why he went to Washington State initially. And all of these things make perfect sense with exactly how you communicate. I can see, he got all these different tools, and that is why I see the product that I see when you teach here on the weekends at ONE&ALL. Anyways.
That is why I see the Kirkland product. on the weekends. Kirkland made.
Kirkland products.
Thank you, Costco.
Yeah, that's right. Rory is a Kirkland
Rory.
product.
We're getting high quality for a cheap price. I love it.
Oh, wow.
So
well
good.
done.
That's ministry right there.
That's it. That's true.
Kirkland signature. That's so good. We got to get him like a Kirkland signature shirt or something. Anyways, go ahead, Rory.
My court classics.
Yes.
Anybody remember those? Anyways, so graduate from Northwest and end up taking a job right out of school working for two Christian counselors in Colorado Springs. Then they produced a radio program together. So it was kind of best of both worlds. I'd help them with the counseling side of things, but then also dabble in the radio stuff, which I learned a little bit at Washington State. So did that. That lasted a year. They ended up having a little bit of an infighting kind of a thing, which is crazy. Two Christian counselors fighting. Anyways, nonetheless, I digress.
Every time you tell that story, I just find it so entertaining.
Yes.
and a little part of me hopes that they're listening.
Right.
Maybe. Who knows?
Either way, it was not a good fit. Again, moving away to a place you'd never been before. And again, not being really relationally connected. That was the thing, is like not connected at Washington State. Northwest University was really good for me. There was a strong community there, but then, transporting and transplanting somewhere totally new and not getting connected. While you're doing Christian counseling, I was totally not plugged into a Christian community. And so that was really rough. So that year, I would actually consider, even despite that freshman year at Washington State, which had at that point been the worst year of my life, that year in Colorado Springs was the worst year of my life because you're just isolated, alone. I worked from home in my apartment by myself, and our clientele was primarily sex addicts. So this was a new territory for me. This was that. And I'm like telling you, like getting crazy phone calls 24/7 of just people going through real life stuff and not having the tools at 22 years of age to be able to help, right? Like I don't have this together. So it was a rough year, but ended up growing a lot. After these counselors kind of had broken ties, I moved back to Seattle, and it was great. I got to, be back home with family and everything. The rough part was finding a job. So the economy had taken a hit. This was the initial recession that everybody felt a little over a decade ago. And so where I had opportunities before, there was just nothing. And so eventually moved from having my own space to moving back in with my parents. I'm living in my sister's old room. There's crazy dolls everywhere. Love you, Mom, but she had crazy dolls everywhere. And it was just rough. And I remember just kind of walking around my neighborhood dejected. But then some of you guys heard the story. Walking around the neighborhood one day, and I just need to make money. I got to be able to pay for my cell phone bill, just basic stuff.
Hot dog soup.
Come on. Hot dog soup. So walk past Matt's Gourmet Hot Dogs. There's a little sign on the door. Says, hey, we're looking for somebody to wear a hot dog costume and make $15 an hour. I want to make $15 an hour. It sounds really good to me.
That's better than Steve's 10.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
For digging
That's
holes.
solid.
So I would go for months on end
And
in
I was
2000.
35.
Yeah, right. I'd just go on that corner. I vividly remember corner 124th in Kirkland and just put on that hot dog costume every day, Monday through Friday, and just move people in. I've told the story, it was close to my high school where I grew up, and I would have like little brothers and sisters of my friends growing up. They would go to the McDonald's across the street or the Taco Time or Taco Bell, whatever, and they would just peg me with like French fries and chicken nuts. They didn't know I was in the suit, but they would just, that was your day. That was your existence living in there. But
Did you ever tell them? Like,
oh
did you
yeah,
ever
I told
see
them
and say,
afterwards.
Like, hey,
I'm like, hey, what are you doing?
That was me.
Yeah. I totally have. But that 6 months or so in that costume was so transformative. Someone gave me an old iPod and I just started podcasting sermons. And it was at that point, again, not connected to a church community or anything, that I just felt like God speaking to me, hey, you got to get plugged back in. You got to go find somewhere to get plugged in and just serve. And so I went back to the church that I grew up in. I found the youth pastor and just said, hey, is there anything I could do to serve? You need me to stack chairs? You need me to pick up after service? Like, what can I do? And he's like, absolutely. And he just took me under his wing and he was like, dude, come stack chairs, do this. Would you ever consider leading a group? So started leading a group of high school guys. And just serving. Eventually, he took me out to Jamba Juice one day and said, hey, I want you to come speak at the summer camp. Big church, big deal. Never given a sermon in my life. Have no idea what I'm doing, but he wants me to come speak at this camp. So come speak at that camp. And that was really like the transforming part for me. It was this big houseboat camp in Canada. And I took The Purpose-Driven Life from Rick Warren and copied it word for word and just basically read it for a whole week. Said, this is real good stuff, guys. But somehow, some way, God showed up in a powerful way on that lake. And I was like, this is what I have to do with my life. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if that's youth ministry or whatever, but this is what I have to be doing with my life.
Isn't that the coolest start to ministry, though, that you knew you had nothing to do with the quality of those messages, but God still worked.
Right.
Like that's like the greatest way to start ministry, because you realize you got to be faithful, but it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So after that, I just asked the youth pastor, hey, what does it look like to intern or something like that? I'm still doing the hot dog thing or whatever, but like I can give up some time. And then soon after, I actually landed a job with the city of Redmond, and I was a transportation evangelist. And I got paid actually pretty well to go around to like senior centers and stuff and let them know about their commuting options. So I'd say, hey, did you know bus 167 rolls by at this time and this can take you where? That's what I would do.
Wait, you call transportation evangelist?
Transportation evangelist. So I would literally go around. Like that's what I was paid to do, is just go to different senior centers and homes and stuff like that.
But isn't that cool that would have given you the skills of relating to people who are older? I mean, that's awesome.
Yep. So again, God's just orchestrating, putting all these little things in your tool belt. And then I asked my boss at the city, I said, hey, could I take Mondays and dedicate that to my church? I'll work 4 10s, Tuesday through Friday, but then that'll free me up to give a day a week to intern at church. And so I started interning at the church and just doing any and everything, writing curriculum, doing messages, whatever. And then 3 months into that youth pastor let me know, hey, he's transitioning to a different department within the church. He said, I think you should really apply for my job. And so applied for the job, did an interview process. There's a crazy story there too, because there was at the time, there was a CFO who was totally cooking the books, and the church did not have the money to be able to actually, afford a youth pastor. Wow. But they actually hired 2 youth pastors at the time. I was one of them, the least qualified of the youth pastors, the guy who read Rick Warren's stuff for his sermons, like that kind of thing. And they hired both of us on. And then soon after that CFO was found out, they actually had to let go like of half the staff. It was crazy. But then these 2 young guys, they kept us on. We for sure thought we were losing our jobs, but we stayed on. And then for the next 10 years, got to be a part of a youth and young adult and even like kids ministry that was really thriving and growing. And it was awesome, like genuinely awesome, getting to learn to build camps from the ground up, have a Wednesday night program, Sunday morning stuff, young adult ministry. And that was really, really great. And then somewhere along the way, a couple of years in there, I met my wife, Laura, on a Sunday night, at a Sunday night church service. Nice. No better place to meet a lady than a church. So we met.
The night service.
The night service. I'm telling you, man. The night service. Good things happen at the night service. So she had just graduated. She just had her first teaching job. She was working as a middle school math teacher, and she was looking for a new church. So she came to a Sunday night service. Somebody invited her to this little community group that we had going on afterwards. And I remember her for the first time just walking through the door, and I'm kind of going, hey, all right,
Hey, you put on your hot dog move costume moves there. Come on in.
I remember noticing her, but being too shy to say anything. But then she just kept showing up, and she just kept showing up. And then our paths started to cross. And I remember iPhones just came out. And so I started Facebook messaging her or whatever. And that was the start of it. And
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That Facebook is how Megan and I started talking.
Yeah. It was just a little back and forth. And it was great. And we met in September, married in August. When you know, you know. Had a big old wedding because he had big youth ministry. She's a teacher. Her mom's hyper connected. She invited everybody. So there was like 800 or 900 people at our wedding.
Wow.
It was massive.
Were the gifts nice?
The gifts were nice.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that was great. That paid for the honeymoon.
Did Costco cater?
Costco actually did cater. That's the only pinwheel sandwiches, bro. That many people. That's how you go. So then, married and doing ministry and loving it. And Laura is teaching and loving it. And then we wanted to be parents, and we wanted to be parents bad. And we had tried a couple times and had miscarriages. And if you ever, gone through that, that's just so rough to, have a pregnancy test and, oh man, here we go. It's finally happening. And then to have something kind of tragic happen, that's rough. And to navigate that when you think, well, you're young and you're healthy and things are going good, you never expect that you'd have that. And then to have it happen a second time and a third time, you're like, what's going on? So, Laura and I had conversations about adoption. We just always knew at some point, like, that would be a part of our story. We kind of figured we'd have biological children first, and then we would adopt later. But I don't know what it was. I'm just going to chalk it up to the Holy Spirit. I just felt like after the last miscarriage that, maybe we should really consider adoption. There were some families in our church who were just... They painted a beautiful picture with their life of what adoption could look like. And they were advocates for it and stuff. And we had saw them do it and do it really well. And if you know, like, foster care and adoption, like, it's a very traumatic, it can be a very traumatic space. But these people just pressed into it and raised these kids up in such an awesome, amazing way. And many of them now we're watching, graduate high school and go to college. And they're just amazing young men and young women. And so I just felt like impressed upon my heart to say, maybe we should consider this. And someone at the church heard that we were even considering it. I don't even know who I talked to or whatever, but our church had a ministry called Special Delivery to unwed single moms who are just trying to figure stuff out. And there was a young girl named Sarah who's 16 and found out that she was pregnant. Didn't know what to do, but also knew that she couldn't raise her child, but didn't want to abort or things like that. So, without filling out any paperwork or anything like that, we got connected with Sarah and got to walk this really cool road with her and her family as she gave birth to our first son, Judah. And it was a little crazy. His story ultimately to tell, but it really, like, I joke that it was a reality show. It was literally a reality show. Like, literally the cameras were there. It was on reality TV on the TLC channel. Like, it was crazy. So you're living this drama out, and to know that you could lose this child at any moment too, like, it was a crazy experience for us. As a family that tested our faith, but it was such a powerful time. I vividly remember Laura's mom and her aunt walking around the hospital as Sarah was giving birth, just prayer walking, and just had this army of people praying for Sarah and this whole thing. So we bring Judah home, and then sure enough, not long after that, we're pregnant with Isaiah, and everything goes smoothly. We give birth to Isaiah, and then we get the double blessing a couple years later of twins when we weren't even trying, and it just happened. So pretty quickly, we have 4 kids, 4 and under, and never thinking we'd have, we weren't even sure we'd ever have kids, but to go and God answer that prayer was really, really cool.
What's cool to see is you can often overlook where you are presently, thinking that it's 10 years down the road that you should be there now. But seeing in all your life experiences, God building that in you,
right,
equipping you for what's meant to come later. But I'm sure, it would have been for me. Getting restless, getting impatient, going like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Dance around in this costume, or what am I doing? Talking about transportation, like to old people, right? But it's like, it's hey, there's always something to learn. Even if it's what not to do, there's always something to learn wherever you are. And so it's cool to see those qualities in you, like identified by an event or an experience.
Yeah.
And I go like, oh, okay, that's why.
It's the hard seasons. It's the age-old thing, but like, it's the hard seasons where you're growing. Like, that's ultimately it. It's the digging a ditch. It's in a hot dog suit. It's that stuff. That's where God's really shaping you. And it's not that you're not shaped in other areas, but man, I feel like that's where God does his best work.
I think, and you get total peace about the future when you look back, because you realize when God says in his word that he orders your path, that he guides your steps, like you say, in real time, it's hard to see. That first year out of school when I didn't know what I wanted to do, I just chose a business degree. And I felt like I wasted a year because I studied law, contract law, economics, marketing, management, organizational behavior. And then fast forward 10 years, I'm sitting in my office with this guy who is a really good businessman because I was about to take over a church at the age of 29. And I said, right, here's my thoughts. And halfway through the conversation, he said, Steve, where did you learn all of this terminology? And I thought, what? And he said, you don't know what you know. Sometimes you don't know what you know. And he said, where did you learn all this? And I said, oh, yeah, first year university when I was 17, I did business. And then he's like, well, dude, God's equipped you for this. And I was like, oh, yeah. I thought I wasted that year of my life.
That's right.
But God never wastes anything, hey?
We just, we're talking to Chris Fink about new song, Christ with the Victory, and talking about the second verse. The lyric is, lead me to your presence where peace and mercy overflow. And when sight and feeling fail me, fix my eyes on all you've done.
On all you've done.
Yeah, we were talking about, you brought up, well, you just looking back, it gives you confidence for the future. If you can observe and be aware of the moves of God in your past.
I was thinking about that exact same thing when he was talking, like that looking back is so powerful.
Yeah. When we were in Israel, I was talking to a few, Orthodox Jews, and I said, how do you describe the Jewish people? And he said, we are a remembering people. And I thought that was his line. And if you look at the scripture, how many times right through the Bible, what does God always call his people to do? He calls them to remember.
Yeah.
And I thought that's really interesting because we're always looking into the future and asking God, why? Like, why won't you do this? Why won't you do that? And he's always saying, hey, just look back and you see that I have done all of those things. And now I'm doing stuff that you can't possibly see.
Yep.
But he doesn't call us to analyze the future. He calls us to remember so that we can just be confident and walk forward with peace.
Yeah. That's good. So Rory, how did you get connected?
A couple years before we'd had our girls, my boss, my mentor, who I totally look up to now as a church planner up in Washington, his daughter, 3-year-old daughter, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And it threw our whole church and our ministry for a loop. He kind of oversaw all the family ministry stuff. I did like middle school, high school, stuff like that. And then there was a kids pastor. Well, he was over all of us. And so when he took a year off because they said, hey, you got about a year with your daughter, you got to make the most of it. So the church just said, go be with your daughter. I jumped into that role, and that season was extremely overwhelming. Not only traumatic from that standpoint, but then we find out we're pregnant with twins. We've got 4 kids and juggling a lot of ministry and responsibility. And eventually a year passes, we kind of get through that. But I also was looking at my life going, I can't run at this same pace with 4 kids. Like I want to be a good dad. I want to be here for my kids, and I can't run at this current pace and do the same things that I'm doing and be a great dad, and even more so a husband, a great husband. So we were looking at that. And then Christmas, the year before we come down here, we find out that my in-laws are going to move down to Southern California. So the executive pastor here at the time, who had at one point been the executive pastor at the church I was connected with in Seattle, we got connected. We went to breakfast one day. And I said, it's crazy. My in-laws are moving to California. Like, I don't know what to do. I just feel overwhelmed here. Not really even considering to move, because while it was crazy, like the dream had been, I want to be the lead pastor at this church one day, and was kind of in that position to eventually do that. So it was this tension that had always been the dream. I want to do that. I don't want to keep running at this pace, though. This is not healthy for my family. And my in-laws are moving. What are we going to do? And God, what are you doing here? And he just said, well, can I have you, fly down to CCV at the time, and just see what God's doing here? And I said, well, free trip to Southern California, let's go. And so we came down and we saw like a rooted graduation down here. And I was like, man, this church is alive. Like God is really doing something special here. But still, why would we leave really the only place we'd ever known? We're probably good there, but we just couldn't shake it. And so we visited here again. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, all right. And the job was to do like kind of kids ministry, which I had not really done kids ministry. I had junior high, high school, maybe 5th and 6th graders, but I never done kids ministry. And that was the role, but we couldn't shake it. And we were like, okay, well, this is weird. Why would we go from kind of second seat at a big church here and come and do kids ministry? But again, it's just that God thing. When you know, why would you leave lead pastor in the place that you grew up and move halfway around the world to come to a place where no one knows you? They don't know, like, but you just can't deny the call of God. Like, it was that big that both my wife and I are looking at ourselves and say, well, we have to go.
And God's timing again, like, God put the brakes on Christy and I for 15 months or 16 months. And Rory and I arrived and started ministry, I think 2 weeks apart.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And
that's
so,
awesome.
like, and again, right from the start, Rory and I needed to work together. He was over discipleship from 0 up to 20. And I was over discipleship from 21 to dead, right? And so, or heaven, I should say. And so, like, right from the start, we came on as two people who had to work together, two people who had needed to be a good team. And, you see God's hand in all that stuff. I love looking back and seeing the way he's orchestrated everything.
So then we moved down here. We always joke our first place down here was right off Route 66. And so we had a little apartment off Route 66 and we had to put our kids in the closet. Like, that was their room. So they slept in the closet for a few months. And as you're transitioning and trying to sell a house up there and all that, it's crazy, but it's great. And 4 years later, man, look at what God's done.
We spent our first 2 weeks at the Best Western. And, we had 3 kids.
The worst Western?
5, 7, 9. And we were in one room with 2 beds.
Yep.
Like, it was a crazy time. And one of the things we had to sacrifice to move here was we had this beautiful house. We had this beautiful 4-bedroom with decks up on a mountain looking over.
I've seen it.
It was rough. But, we knew that it was funny. I remember when we got that house, I'd said to Christy offhand, God's blessed us for this house. One day he might ask us to give it up for ministry.
Wow. Yeah.
And then, 13 years later, it was like, I'll take that now.
Yeah.
Right.
What's one thing you both, as we kind of wrap up, you're both looking forward to? It could be in the next few months in terms of one and all, in the direction it's going. What's something that's got you excited?
I would jump in and say, at the moment of this recording, we're in a crisis season, right? Pandemic and all of that stuff. But I really do believe that crisis can lead to innovation. And I think that when we get out of this pandemic, I'm excited to see some of the innovations the church has made. But I'm also excited to see what that looks like for One and All. We're still going to be the church, and we're going to still love and care for and pastor and equip people and send them out. But the mechanisms in how we do that might change a little bit, or things might become more prominent. And I'm excited to see that. And I'm excited that our church wants to be on the cutting edge of that. And rather than being shying away from that, rather
embrace it.
We're pressing in.
Yeah.
We're
or
trying
wallowing
to
or being upset with the season that we're in of like, well, we can't meet. This sucks. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I keep trying to say this phrase because I've heard it before, but how do you just turn the obstacle into an opportunity? And I feel like that's the posture of our church right now, the leadership of our church, like every department and even our congregation. I say, how can we leverage this obstacle and turn it into an opportunity? And I think we're seeing that happen in real time right now. And we don't even know all the ramifications, but I'm excited to be a part of a community that's willing to really like smoke what they sell. To speak, to actually say, hey, we will do anything short of sin to see people far from God come near. And that might look like a podcast. That might look like putting on a VR headset. That might look like meeting in a living room or going on the front lines, helping people, provide groceries, things like that. But whatever it looks like, we're willing to do it.
Yeah, I think the benefit of bringing outsiders into a church, like it's always the best to have your leaders develop from within, but the benefit of bringing outsiders in is sometimes a church doesn't know what it has. And one of the underlying heart attitudes that Jeff brings to a church is faith in the gospel. And I know that sounds so elemental, but there are so many churches that when they preach the gospel, they have no expectation that someone's actually going to get up and give their life to Jesus. Whereas in this church, there is a fundamental belief that every time we preach the gospel, someone's going to give their life to Jesus. And I mean, I'm still blown away that once a month we have a prayer night where only Christians seem to come and someone becomes a Christian once a month at a prayer night. And now you translate that into a culture where everyone expects people far from God to come near because we believe that the gospel works. You know, Romans 1:16, it's the power unto salvation. And now I think because God's orchestrated a team that are so forward focused now, I really feel like God has expanded our territory. And, you know, through One and All Media, through even in Southern California with planting campuses, we have 2 super highways that he's building for the gospel. And I really believe that God is positioning our church to share the gospel. And the cool thing about it too is our church won't necessarily get bigger, but the kingdom will. And I think that there's something really beautiful about the way One and All Media is developing. Each time I always wanted our church to get bigger. Like I'm hungry for our church to get bigger because I like churches that grow because I want to see people saved. But it's funny that each time we've looked at globally growing our church, the door gets shut. But every time we look at just sharing the gospel, the door gets opened. And I feel like it's really interesting. I feel like we're going to be a gospel proclaiming church. That the gospel's going to go far and wide from this church, and the kingdom's going to be built. This church may be bigger in the future. It may not be much bigger, but I know that our influence is going to be bigger, and that's really exciting. A little sideline gig too, which I feel like God's been stirring in my heart for a couple of years, is women and the role of women in church. And
that's awesome.
And I really feel that it's a check in my spirit that we have an untapped potential in this church. We have a lot of fantastic female staff. We've got a female member of our executive, Corrine. She's a superstar. People don't really know that. If they understood what she achieves in our church, she would be way more honored publicly than she is, but she's humble and that's not even an issue for her. But Christy and I pray about this and talk about this, about wanting not to push down any barriers or push down doors, but wanting to walk with God and see women at One and All Church break through. I mean, Rory's wife, Laura, is just a powerful woman of God. Megan, who I get to work with, Aaron's wife, Megan is a young leader with so much potential. She has a fantastic heart. But God has gifted her with leadership qualities, man. She's a strong leader with a brilliant mind for detail and strategy, and just so many. I just really see that as a thing where God's like really tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, dude, if we can unlock the gifts that I've put into the women in this church, it's like we're going to discover we've got a second leg that we haven't been exercising, and now we're going to be able to run." So that's another thing exciting for me, really excited about.
Yeah. I've loved seeing even just Christy, seeing more of her. Yeah. Get her up. Even, when it's on the midday meetup, you know, like when she speaks into things, she's speaking from revelation. She's speaking from devotion. She's speaking from what God has spoken to her. And I need to hear it. And I know a lot of other people need to hear it. And that's why I love, just on very level one, hearing people who they are and their upbringings. That's why, like, if it's your first time sitting down on the podcast, we're just going to talk about where'd you come from? What do what are your interests? Because every time I learn something new from somebody, and I see God moving in someone else's life, and you start to understand this person speaking from a place of revelation.
That's right.
Christy and I, it's so funny, like, we led our church back in Australia. It was no question mark that Christy and I led that church. And when she came here, it was a huge sacrifice for her
Mm-hmm.
because there was nowhere near the involvement.
Right.
I mean, she was the executive pastor of our church. She was the communications director. She was the worship lead of worship. But it's funny that when I lead here, I always feel that Christy and I are doing that together.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then it's the funny thing is, like, we talk about everything. I have every meeting twice a day. I have it, and then I get home and I have it again.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's because she cares so deeply about the church, and she's gifted to lead, and it's really cool that. I joked with Jeff, you buy me, you get 2 for the price of 1. Like Christy is, she's a key leader in our church. And I love leading with her.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, when we do those little things on the video together, I forget that people don't know her very well.
Right.
And I forget, and she's a powerhouse. She's I tell her all the time, one of her most attractive qualities is that she has zero pretense. Like zero. And Ben probably knows Christy the best in this circle, but there's just no pretense in her. Something I cannot claim. And that's one of her most attractive qualities. And she just loves Jesus and loves people so purely. And that's the sort of stuff we can untap more and more in our church.
Yeah.
Through this innovation, I mean, I think about what Rory's most excited about. The reason that we're seeing Christy more is because we're no longer doing things centralized, and we're forced to do things digitally, which means we're all working from home, contrary to how we're recording this podcast, but we're all working from home, meaning our wives are involved in what's going on, whether they're actually had a day-to-day at the church or not. And I just even look around the room, all 4 of us are married to these strong female characters that you're talking about, Steve, where it's like
But Ben hides his wife.
except for was it recently on the podcast? Ben told us the story of how he got the wife, how he got his wife to come and meet with him, and it was actually putting her on stage. So on the contrary, let her out of hiding.
I think
so
what
that
you're
he could meet her.
technically saying is that Ben paid his wife to go on their first date.
Yeah.
That's one way, or he made the church pay for it. It's one of the other.
Better.
But yes,
I
but we
abused
digress.
my power.
Yeah, that's great, gentlemen. Just appreciate you guys being here. How you lead our church, in sharing a little bit of your life. What I love so much about this podcast, not only is it transparent for kind of the systems and what goes on, but every single person that has come on here has had some moment where I've heard Rory share a lot of those stories. But sharing them from stage, you told all of those familiar stories in a very different way when this mic was in front of you. And so the transparency that this podcast brings to the people of our church is what gets me really excited. So
I agree. And I have 3 very deep theological questions for you as we sign off. The first one, do you drink coffee? Yes or no?
No.
Yes. You're probably like a hot lemon water guy, aren't
Diet
you?
Coke. Diet Coke. I'm so addicted, but actually not as addicted anymore. Thank you, coronavirus.
First thing I bought in America was a coffee machine.
Yeah. What's your favorite coffee? Like style?
is that the second question?
Yeah,
No,
it's
okay.
the favorite
One
one to
A.
drink
AB.
is a flat white, but I'm an old man, so I have to have black coffee these days to stay healthy.
Okay. Chris, we were talking to Chris before this, and he said he's gonna say Diet Coke when we were talking about Rory. We're like, I feel like he just maybe like drinks warm lemon water or something in the morning. And he's like, no, it's Diet Coke for sure.
He said, I feel like I've known him.
moved to pH water from
I am
Costco.
trying to help Rory make better decisions for his health.
Well, we normally have
That's part of the role you play in this relationship.
yeah, staying connected. We normally have coffee, and we like to review it at the end. So
this is a disappointing
well,
moment.
this coffee was terrible.
Well, yeah, didn't exist. But we're trying to. It's a little bit more difficult to get a quick coffee nowadays. But that was question 1. 2, favorite food. Like you have one meal left. You're on an island.
All right, no, I'm going to twist that around.
You're gonna twitch it around
because I love all food so much. The way I shape it is if I had to eat one food for the rest of my life,
one meal,
it would be curry.
Oh,
Because I love all the different variations of curry, and I love curry. So That would be my choice.
There you go.
2 things. Adam's peanut butter fudge ripple cheesecake from the Cheesecake
Once
Factory.
again, I desperately need to help Rory with this stuff.
He's proving the point.
Number 2.
You're gonna die,
Number
Rory.
2. You don't know. Here's the thing, though. What do I eat for breakfast? I have blueberries and like a protein shake. I have salad for lunch every day.
That is true. He is good at that.
So that, if it was a dessert. Number 2, shrimp Louis salad from the Pizza Bank in Kirkland, Washington.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Delicious.
What is shrimp Louis
Shrimp
salad?
Louis. So baby shrimp and then like
I want
hard-boiled
my
egg.
baby back
Shrimp.
ribs.
And a whole bunch of other things. Cheese, sorts of good stuff.
Wow, so interesting. Learn a lot about people based on their favorite meals.
Yes.
No judgment, just
Mostly
interesting
it's
to find out.
routine. It's just routine. I like the routine of leaving the office and going to McDonald's, and I just get those same things. Like that's the routine of I don't want to be in one place for 8 hours at a time. I need to move.
Yeah.
So I need to.
Yeah.
Last one. Number 1, single most pet hate or pet peeve.
Good question.
Oh,
Have to know what gets under your skin.
this is hard for me.
Found out Denford's quite OCD.
I'd have to ask my wife. She's the one who knows the answer to this question.
Yeah.
No, it's the thing. It's okay to say it. Mine is when people walk slowly in front of me and there's no way around them. So like on a walkway, right, if it's the street on one end and then a fence on the other, and there's a group of 4 people and they're all walking shoulder to shoulder, instead of like one in front of another, there's at least a gap to get through, but they're walking slow and I can't get around them. Like Disneyland.
I think for me,
Worst nightmare.
I'm not an angry person and I'm fairly chilled about most things. But I think that the one that would regularly come up for me is inconsiderate drivers. And what I'm talking about there is like the type of people who, when all the traffic's banked up, they just drive right across and block for the next group of people to come through, you know? Just think about someone else on the road.
Like changing lanes.
For 3 seconds. You're so
Road rage.
you're so like self-absorbed that you haven't in any way considered how this road is going to be used. And you know, like all you had to do was stop and leave a 12-foot gap.
Yeah.
And now this guy over here, he can just drive through. But no, you're just going to sit there.
Yeah.
And
Well,
now
I think-
we're all clogged up even more.
I think you probably experience that most often driving, but I would dig even a little deeper and say, I think it's you probably get set off by lack of consideration for surroundings or environment, right? So that could be applied to anything.
Yeah,
But just come in,
thoughtlessness.
Thoughtlessness.
Vacuous behavior.
Kirkland man,
Kirkland.
do you have a pet peeve?
This is so hard for me. Not a lot of things end up phasing me, really. I genuinely, I don't even know if I can.
We'll have to ask Laura.
Things happen.
I find myself turning into an old man in the car right now when it gets loud. I do find myself like starting
Kids
to lose my
bickering
mind.
in the background.
Yeah, in the back. I'm like, I'm going to pull the car over. Like, I've totally done that. I've totally done it. And
Do you want me to come back there?
yeah, so
I thought
that's
you were
my
like the
life
best
right now.
parent ever, and I'm feeling so much better now because I'm
man.
like a terrible like that.
Yeah. Oh,
Anyways,
with
thanks,
that.
guys. It's good to know we're all human. We all get frustrated at things, but don't be the driver that cuts everyone off.
Don't do that.
All right, thanks, guys. Much
Thank
love.
you.
boom.
We'll do
Thanks for
this.
having us.
Well, thank you for joining us on that episode of the One and All podcast. I would love to encourage you guys, wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, just find that subscribe button, hit subscribe. You'll get notified of all the future episodes that come out, life-changing stories like the one you just heard. I'd also encourage you, check out that notes section. We have a ton of helpful links because we want to connect with you and help you get connected with us, whatever that looks like. So why don't you check out that notes section, see what applies to you. Ben, you got any final thoughts?
Nope, you nailed it. That was brilliant. Until next time.